Back on the Y'all Show, talk with a Southern accent, and we're going to put our college football helmet on right now on the show that covers everything in the South, as we had arguably you could call it the unofficial opening to most of college football happen in week 2, where at least give them credit, the Big 12 suited up and played a little football, although some people would say, did they? Did they really play football in that particular week? We'll have some fun and more now. Talking to our Big 12 barrister, Matt Heermans. He is coming on the show that covers everything Southern, to discuss what in the world happened in this last weekend of college football. And then there's a little bit of Big 12 action on the gridiron here this weekend. And then in a few minutes, Matt Heermans is going to switch over from talking about the Big 12, and he's going to be talking barbecue. And I got to ask him a few questions about grills. And something tells me he actually might enjoy talking grills more than talking Big 12 football this week. But Matt Heermans, we welcome you back to the show that covers everything Big 12.
I'm happy to be back. And, yeah, man, I don't know. When you said the Big 12 suited up to play football, I thought you were just kind of setting up a punchline there. But, yeah, what an interesting weekend, huh?
Interesting is one way to put it. Now, Matt Heermans, I know why the SEC waited until September 26th to play football. So if you're laughing about the Big 12 from this past weekend, the SEC waited because they were scared to play the Fun Belt. And believe it or not, I know South Carolina was supposed to open with Coastal Carolina. I think the Chanticleers might have beat them here, and other SEC teams would have failed. Congratulations to the Sun Belt Conference. Man, what an impressive performance with victories over the Big 12.
Clearly the most powerful league in the country at this moment. You look at that win strength, it's not even close, I would say. The SEC hadn't started. The Big Ten has not lumbered its way into starting yet either. So, yeah, congrats to the Sun Belt, the powerful juggernaut Sun Belt Conference. Acquitted itself very, very well.
They did that and more. We are talking Big 12 football. If you have a question or comment about this league, and maybe you have questions about what in the world happened to teams like Iowa State and Kansas State, even Texas Tech, they escaped against Houston Baptist here. We'll let Matt Heermans dissect it all right here on Y'all. To the Big 12's credit, they did have a couple of wins. Congratulations to the Texas Longhorns. They dismantled UTEP. You would expect they would do that. They did that. Oklahoma looked mighty good against FCS opponent Missouri State. Now, a couple of teams, they had to back out of play at kind of the last minute. TCU among the teams. Oklahoma State also backed out. Where do we stand right now, Big 12 barrister, entering this week that you're going to see at least one matchup? I think Oklahoma State's supposed to play this weekend for the first time. Where do we stand, coronavirus and all, with the Big 12?
You know, I hate to say it's a good question, but it's a good question.
Because it changes all the time.
All the time. So basically, as we all know, it amounts to testing. So, you know, TCU had some issues with the COVID-19, and the kind of anticipated game, at least from my perspective, against SMU, canceled. I don't think there's going to be any makeup weeks. I don't think when you talk about finals as the season progresses, I don't think you have a lot of makeup weeks. So I think, you know, non-conference games, if you miss them, that's it. You know, the conference games are going to make something that's going to be a very, very difficult scenario if people start missing conference games, because then, of course, you have an uneven distribution of games and all that. So I don't know. Week to week is what I would say. But,
okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's when you say, you know, I think this is going to happen, I guess the real answer is, like, what happens with the next round of tests for the players and coaching staff? And I don't think anybody knows.
Any early word about how things went this past weekend in terms of the virus, the fact that you did have fans in some of the stadiums?
Yeah, I mean, you had very, very few fans. I haven't heard anything about any type of congregation-linked COVID spread. If you look at a lot of the stadiums, you're talking an incredibly small number of people spaced out 6 feet. There were some kind of funny memes from this past weekend from people in the stands, but certainly plenty of space. I haven't heard anything, any type of breakout related thing. I've heard been some high school issues from people getting together watching games this last week in the state of Texas, but that's separate.
All right, we're going to play some highlights of two of the Big 12 opponents in a second, Oklahoma and Texas, both with rather easy wins in this opening weekend, this past weekend for Big 12 football. We do want to point out that, of course, you had two bad losses with Iowa State and Kansas State losing to Sun Belt opponents. As I said, Texas Tech narrowly escaped against Houston Baptist. The Huskies with a chance to try to get a 2-point conversion, and that failed, and they lost there in Lubbock to the Red Raiders. A tough loss for that program, but to their credit, they tried to take away the win there in West Texas, and unfortunately for them, it just didn't work out. But yes, you also had, let me not forget, that Kansas lost to Coastal Carolina. Also, that was a late game. The whole nation saw that one because it was the only college football being played late Saturday night. Les Miles, for the second year in a row, has lost to Conway, South Carolina's own Chanticleers. So Matt Heermans, West Virginia, got a win over EKU, big time, 56-10, the final on that one. As we try to wrap up this week and move on, what in the world happened that those Big 12 teams looked mighty awful against three Sun Belt teams?
Mighty awful, yeah. That's
I mean,
exactly the way
two of those games, Matt, it really wasn't even close. Coastal Carolina kicked the crap out of Kansas, and
I would say that the Iowa State game, that Iowa State was trailing Louisiana Lafayette for almost the entire game there, and they looked like they might mount some type of a comeback at some point, but that was if you just watched that game, you would say Louisiana Lafayette just thoroughly dominated Iowa State from start to finish, and I did watch that game, and I've had good things to say. Well, I guess we can start there. I've had good things to say in the past, both about Coach Matt Campbell and about Brock Purdy, the starting quarterback for Iowa State. Neither one, not their finest day. I wouldn't call that a well-called game, and certainly Brock Purdy went something like 16-37 with 165 and a pick. Not the way you want to start the season from a guy who's been a pretty good player, but again, Louisiana Lafayette just came right in and kind of punched them right in the mouth. We did also talk, too, about, this first week, there really aren't any warm-ups. This is a warm-up, in quotes, no offense to the Raging Cajuns. They're a good program and they look great. But this is a game that Iowa State scheduled with the idea of getting a win, right? And not just getting a win, probably getting their backup some playing time in the second half. And that did not happen. They were dominated, and nobody looked good for Iowa State, and a lot of guys looked good for Louisiana Lafayette. So, it's a weird season so far already. I think we actually not that we predicted all this, but we had a conversation talking about, hey, how are these Power 5 teams going to look without three non-conference games to get you warmed up? And the answer for a lot of them, particularly in the Big 12, is not good.
If history is any indication, Matt Heermans, I happened to tune in last year, 2019, for the season opener for Kansas State. I'm sorry, it was Iowa State. My apologies. Iowa State, and their 2019 season opener, they narrowly escaped in overtime over Northern Iowa. So they have a little bit of a history of struggling out of the gate, and then they turn around and beat teams like Oklahoma.
Yeah, you're right. And there's a weird thing about those other Iowa schools. They seem to always come and play, whether it's Iowa or whether it's Iowa State. And, of course, this year we're talking about number 23 Iowa State, by the way. Not that – I don't know how they came up with that ranking, but it was a ranking.
There's not still 23, are they?
No, well, no, I don't think they're going to be 23. But, it's one of those things. If you're missing two Power 5 conferences, the top 25 should probably be more like the top 15 if you wanted to get real. But anyway, different subject. The point is, Yes, they have struggled, particularly with Iowa teams at the beginning of the season. But this South Louisiana group of
I like that
Raging
throwback.
Cajuns came in.
USL there, Southwest Louisiana.
That's right. They came in and we're all hopped up on gumbo and gave it to them for sure.
Jake Delhomme, you daylight come and you wanted Delhomme, to quote Chris Berman. Yeah, but a bad day there. Let's talk about some positives. I know that's maybe for some people hard to pull up here after this last week of Big 12 football, but there were a few positives, and we'll start off with Mr. Rattler in Norman, Oklahoma, as OU came out strong against Missouri State, which, oh, by the way, I had completely forgotten who the Bears' brand new head coach was here for 2020. And he needs to step up his game there in Springfield. Bobby Petrino is who I'm talking about.
I was about to. Well, I was going to make a joke, but I'm not going to make a joke.
No, go. I need some humor. We all need humor after this last weekend.
I was just going to say, hey, he's probably on 4 wheels, not 2. I think that's probably part of his contract, no motorcycles. But that's kind of an old joke. Either way, he's a fine coach, and I'm sure he'll do good work there, in his new stop. But yeah, Spencer Rattler, kind of a cool name, and certainly a dual threat type of quarterback in Oklahoma. And look, Oklahoma we've kind of talked about this before. They're always a very good football team, but there have been years where they've done a heck of a lot more than they probably should have with their overall team balance. But Oklahoma is going to continue to field good offenses. It is going to happen. There may be some years where they have a great defense as well, but with Lincoln Riley there and the way they run that offense and the kind of, I don't think it's overstating it to say his kind of ability, his genius ability to work players in, particularly new players. We saw that a little bit with Jalen Hurts. Didn't set the world on fire last year, but still played well. You bring in a guy like Spencer Rattler, and you just immediately have another electric type of player coming in from Texas, of course, which is where Oklahoma gets the majority of their talent. But looked great. I understand we're dealing with a certain level of competition. However, other teams couldn't manage that level of competition, and Oklahoma did. And Mr. Rattler looked pretty good with his arms and with his feet. He is a dual threat type guy, but he looks better throwing the ball than some other dual threat type guys. I would say, just looking at Spencer Rattler, he appears to be an upgrade in passing ability from Jalen Hurts last year. We will see how that plays out, but I think Lincoln Riley missed that last year, that ability to survey the field and put the ball where it needs to go. Not that Jalen Hurts is an incompetent passer, but Lincoln Riley's had some other guys there that are more. It comes more natural to them, and Spencer Rattler, looks like he's one of those guys. So nothing. If you're an Oklahoma Sooner, there's nothing to be. There's nothing that over this last weekend is going to worry you. I think you're going to be pretty excited about your new quarterback.
And Rattler did get some time in 2019. What game or games do you remember him getting a fair amount of snaps in?
He did get a little bit of playing time last year. Towards the end of the season, he was worked in a little bit with Hurts when games were no longer in doubt. But I would say nothing. He certainly didn't start. He certainly didn't start the second half. He just got a few snaps here and there. But it looks like it paid off because he looked pretty natural out there and impressive. I'll just use the word impressive.
We are talking Big 12 football. This is the Y'all Show, and we have our Big 12 and barbecue barrister Matt Heermans on the show that's all about the South. If you have a question or comment, or you just want to hit a little like on our Facebook feed, we appreciate that. Also, we kindly ask that you please share, not only by sharing literally on Facebook, but please, when you're at the beauty shop or you're going down to your local restaurant or watering hole, tell everybody about y'all.com. Tell them that, hey, if you like the Big 12, that Matt Heermans is a frequent guest to talk about Big 12 sports and more. And then we get him to do double duty, and we get him to talk about grilling and barbecuing too. So quite a combination right here on Y'all, courtesy of our friend and partner, Matt Heermans. Okay, Matt, let's move on to the Horns. Texas with a big win over their in-state foe, UTEP. Of course, UTEP, one of the worst teams in all of college football. Texas gets the commanding win there on the 40 acres, defeating UTEP 59-3.
Dominating performance. Sam Ehlinger, I've had quite a bit of good things to say about him over the years. He's had some really, really high moments. The Georgia game, bowl game a couple of years ago comes to mind. And he's had some struggles a little bit from time to time last year, but he's one of these guys that, you really can't question his tenacity. He's a really tough kid. With grit, who's not afraid to put his head down. I know some of these things sound cliche, but if you watch Sam Ehlinger play, he's a guy that just seems to really, really like playing football and really getting his nose dirty, if you want to put it that way. He loves to bowl over linebackers. I'm sure Tom Herman has probably told him a little bit this year, hey, listen, let's not be taking on any linebackers, particularly middle linebackers up the middle. Let's not do that. But he's a guy who just loves to play. He's a tough guy. He's a guy that I would love to have in any type of backfield, no matter what team. He can get the job done, too, with his arm. But there's something intangible about Ehlinger, the way he plays football, and I've always been a fan of his. He showed it there. This was a game, like you said, John. UTEP, coming in from El Paso, not a good football program at all. But again, with this, the way this week played out, you have to give Tom Herman and the Texas Longhorns the, kudos for how they were prepared to come out and totally dominate their opponent, which they did. So, we've talked about it before, and I'll just leave it at this. Tom Herman needs to win this year very, very badly. I mean, Austin wants him to win very, very badly. I'll just put it that way. If he does not win, if he does not challenge for the Big 12 title, at least put himself in the hunt for it towards the end of the year. Doesn't matter what kind of season. It doesn't matter what kind of virus is going on. They are not going to be happy with him in Austin, period. So he's got a lot of pressure on him. This is a great way to open the season if you're Tom Herman, to come out with a commanding win and your star quarterback looking really good.
Well, after this bad weekend overall for the Big 12, most of the teams get a little breather with no games going on here for Week 3. However, we do have two Big 12 teams that will be in action against non-conference opponents, as a game that Tulsa was supposed to have against Oklahoma State got postponed to this week because of coronavirus positive test. That game taking place in Stillwater. And then the Baylor Bears and the Houston Cougars get together. I think this is their first time they've been playing on the gridiron since the Southwest Conference days. And now they've also announced a future home and home or something like that between the Bears and the Cougars. I'm excited to see this matchup taking place there at McLean Stadium. Your thoughts on what's going on Big 12-wise this weekend, Barbecue Barrister?
Yeah, it has been a long time since the Baylor. I want to say, you had it's been a while. Put it this
I think
way.
I saw somewhere it was 1995.
I was about to say 96, but that sounds right. You're talking Houston Cougars slinging it all over the yard. Oh man, the head coach there is really slipping away from me. That's unfortunate too, because he's a legend. And then Baylor, it's been a long time. This game was played in a different stadium. Both teams were in a different stadium at that time, but they would have been.
Kudos to both programs for getting brand new football stadiums. It's not often that college teams get new football stadiums, and both of those schools in the last 5 years, I think, have brand new palaces.
They do, and McLean Stadium is a tremendous improvement for Baylor, not only because of the quality of it, and it is a nice stadium, but the other stadium, Floyd Casey, was located a long way from campus. It was across I-35 and down a road and around a corner, and kind of a weird spot for a college stadium. But now McLean is right there on the Baylor campus, right along the Brazos River, and a pretty cool venue. So anyway, I'm excited. This is Baylor. This is not the Baylor that certainly not the Baylor under Art Briles, but this is not going to be the Baylor under again, drawing a blank. The prime head coaching commodity who's now in the NFL. He did a fine job last year. I don't know why I can't remember his name, but
Did Coach Houston?
No, Coach Baylor.
Oh, okay.
You're
Matt Rule, Mr. King Pound.
Matt Rule, yes, Matt Rule. Drawing a blank. So this is not
Although
the Baylor
his
Bears
team did rule against the Raiders this past weekend.
Hey, absolutely did. He is a fine coach. The job that he did at Baylor after what happened under Art Briles is probably one of the most impressive coaching jobs that I've seen in my life. There's really no way to overstate it. And I think a lot of people agreed with that because look where he is now. So long story short, I'm looking forward to this game. Baylor and Houston, neither one of them are picked to necessarily win their respective conferences. But if you're a person, similar to the age that I am, and you watch Southwest Conference football, this is a great flashback, and we're looking forward to it.
See, Matt Heermans, everybody, is so into Big 12 football that when a coach like Matt Rule takes off to the NFL, Matt Heermans totally just flushes him from his memory. It's like he never existed.
That's right. It's like the birth certificate just goes away, like it never even happened. Yeah.
All right, let's talk about next weekend, okay? As I said, you've got Oklahoma State and you have Baylor suiting up this weekend. Most of the teams have this sort of escape this weekend where they don't have to play. Then it's all Big 12 going forward. So a preview to next weekend in the Big 12, and that includes this Big 12 versus Big 12 action. K-State tries to rebound. They'll be in Norman. Tough challenge there against the Sooners. Iowa State tries to rebound, and they'll be taking on TCU, which, by the way, TCU still hasn't played. They're not playing this weekend, so this will be their very first game. That's got to be a little bit of a challenge.
I think that will be a little bit of a challenge. TCU's got a lot of question marks anyway. We talked about prior to the season, we talked about Max Duggan, the kind of like supposed starter who was going to be a true sophomore who's done. He's not going to be playing. So you've got questions there at quarterback. And you talk about being rusty. I mean, you've got a program coming in there that came off one of the most embarrassing losses for them from their perspective in a very long time, something that's not going to make them happy. And they're going to roll into TCU, who has been doing who knows what except recovering from the COVID virus. This makes for quite a matchup. This makes for a situation where your gut tells you want to bet on the team that's already at least gotten their helmet dirty in this scenario, despite the loss. Things change a lot between week 1 and week 2 for a team. I know this is not technically week 1. Who knows what week it is really, but the point is between your first game and your second game, things can change quite a bit. I think you got to like the team that's already suited up.
And when we talked about coaches' hot seats, we didn't mention Coach Patterson. TCU, which had been one of the best programs in college football just a couple of years ago, they've really struggled. Is Coach Patterson on the hot seat here in 2020?
Well, the funny thing about TCU, you think of TCU, and honestly what a lot of people still think about TCU is being a top 10 rated team and being Wisconsin in the Rose Bowl. That is a long time ago at this point. TCU has not challenged a lot in the Big 12 so far. They've had a lot of mediocre and not so hot seasons recently. However, Gary Patterson is a fixture in Fort Worth. I do not think he's going to be on the hot seat. I think he's a fine coach. I think the powers that be there in Fort Worth understand they have a fine coach who has struggled. Look, there's whatever you want to say, there's a big difference in maintaining a high level of football in the Mountain West Conference being in Texas than there is being in the Big 12 and being in Texas. So I think people who understand that. I don't think he's in any trouble. I mean, if you have another 4 or 5 win season, I don't know, maybe there's going to be people who aren't happy, but he's got a resume and skins on the wall. And you're talking about TCU, who's had some good seasons in fairly recent past. But this is still a private school. They have money, but this is somebody who wants to hang on to somebody who's got a connection to the program, put it that way. And I think he's going to be okay.
Very well put. We're wrapping up our Big 12 talk with Matt Heermans, our Big 12 and barbecue barrister. Also in week 4, that's next weekend, Austin Baptist Just kidding. It's the University of Texas, not Houston Baptist, but Austin Baptist. I'm just kidding. The Horns roll into Jones AT&T Stadium for a game against Texas Tech.
You're just saying the word Baptist, and the Red Raiders start getting a little fidgety out there.
Are there any Baptists in Austin?
Well, I don't know. You know what? There used to be. I'm not sure anymore. That's a good question. But if there were,
evidently lots of sinners there.
If there were, you'd probably want to, at least put them on the sidelines to scare the out of the Texas Tech Red Raiders. So
yeah.
But I don't think they're going to need that. We let Texas Tech off the hook. I would say there's no reason to go too deep into that game, but
because they at least won.
I mean, yeah, they won. I mean, this is I was gonna say it was the worst loss of the weekend, the win, but it is a win technically, and you got a program there at Houston Baptist who's had football for I think 5 years total, and who won 5 games in their FCS league last year. So, and they could have won that football game, and very easily could have won the football game. So. I think Texas is probably not terribly concerned about rolling into Lubbock right now. Weird things have happened there for sure, but you're talking about a football team in Texas who thinks they can win the Big 12, and you're talking about a Texas Tech program coming off 4 wins, and looks like 4 wins would be a coup this year. So I think if you're Tom Herman, you want to prep your team for crazy stuff, but you got to be feeling pretty good about that game.
All right, 2 other games. This is, again, our primer, since I doubt we'll have a chance to catch up with Matt Heermans before Week 4 of Big 12 football. You also have WVU going to Boone Pickens Stadium in Stillwater to take on a top 20 Oklahoma State Cowboy team. And then Les Miles and the Kansas Jayhawks, they go down to McLean Stadium and a matchup against the Baylor Bears. Thoughts on any of those contests?
Well, we don't know anything at all about Oklahoma State right now. I wish that I have, wished I had seen some of what Mike Gundy's got going on there. We know about
Matt. I don't know why you don't know about Oklahoma State when you say you want to maybe tune them in. Just tune into OAN and you'll see all kinds of Oklahoma State information.
You beat me to it. I was about to mention the off-season T-shirt gate. So what we do know is that. Certain T-shirts are unacceptable in Stillwater. So what I would say is what we do know now is you want to stick with an Eskimo Joe's T-shirt if you're in Stillwater. Let's just keep it safe. I don't think anybody's going to have a problem with that. The institution there close to campus that everybody knows about. But we don't know anything about Oklahoma State. The off-season turmoil there with Mike Gundy, I think some people are surprised that Mike Gundy is still going to be there. I'm a bit surprised. That's not a judgment on whether he should or shouldn't be. I'm just a little bit surprised that he's there. So it'll be very curious, very interesting to see what happens to Oklahoma State this season, whether that brings the program together, whether it causes friction on the team. I'm very curious. I'll be tuned in. I haven't seen anything of Oklahoma State at this point to know anything about the team. And after this last week, I'm extremely hesitant to say anything about any team without seeing them play. I don't know. It's get out the popcorn bucket.
And when you talk about the Pokes, remember in the backfield, it's all about Chuba Hubbard.
Chuba Hubbard.
Did you like that?
Yeah. The Chuba Hubbard, not only the leading rusher, but from a certain perspective, maybe the head coach.
Yeah.
Maybe the general manager of the football team.
Yeah.
At least in charge of T-shirt policy at Oklahoma State.
Sure.
So he's got 2 hats. Wearing 2 hats this year. Let's see how that plays out.
Always good to be kind of led down a path by a Canadian. Just watch out for those Canadians. Matt Heermans, thank you for your insight on the Big 12. We are not done with you, fella. We're going to give you a half second to catch your breath and come back and put your barbecue barrister hat on. We're going to talk about grills with you. Sports-wise, we want y'all to make sure you keep watching us here at Y'all. And, again, like us, Follow us. Tell everybody you know about y'all.com and y'all.com on Facebook. And also go to y'all.com and sign up for the all-new Y'all email newsletter. You get a free email sent to you each week. All you got to do is sign up. So click on any story and you'll see there in the upper right-hand corner the way you can subscribe to the Y'all newsletter that comes out each week. A great way to stay on top of everything Southern. And on Thursdays, Y'all broadcast that we kind of put out all the time. Sports-wise, we want you to make sure you stick around. I don't know how much you're into golf, Matt Heermans, but this weekend we have the U.S. Open, and our sort of Southern PGA, our expert on all things PGA, Jason Nall, will be right back here to tell us a little bit about PGA golf and the U.S. Open, and we still have the Masters to be played before the year is out. Jason Nall talking golf on our Thursday broadcast, so that sports-wise is something to kind of make a note of if you don't mind. Again, Matt Heermans is going to be back with us in just a second to talk about grilling and more, so you don't want to miss out on the fun on this Y'all show, the show that's all about the stuff. We'll be right back, y'all.